Welcome to Desk Careers. I'm so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today we are meeting with Nassib Azar, who is a games developer and an entrepreneur. Welcome, Nassib. It's so great to have you with me today.
Thank you, Maria. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited. Lots of exciting things to be talking about. Watching this right now live, we have young students across the college that are really interested in what you do. And then, of course, we have students who will be watching the pre-recorded interview who may also want to ask some questions. There are so many questions to be talking about and asking you today about your career as an architect and then how you made that transition into your current role as a games developer and a new entrepreneur. So let's start right at the beginning. Can you remember being a teenager, Nassib, and that iconic question that I think everybody gets asked at some point in their youth is, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh my God, like everyone remembers being asked that, right? Over and over again. And, I've got to say it may have changed many times. And I think it hasn't, if one thing has not changed over generations is that a lot of times we don't know what we want to do around that age, right? Like we're just so involved in life. We're so involved with experiencing so many different things. And to think of being, funneled down or to choose one thing to do for the rest of your life, which you may or may not be very familiar with, that's a hard thing to wrap your head around. So it was the same for me. And I went everywhere from wanting to be an astronaut to a professional football player to once I got older and I started understanding, what's available in the world and what's available in my immediate environment to maybe going into graphic design. But what was always, in the background was just me playing video games. I was playing football a lot and playing some video games and always drawing and sketching. But at the time, you never thought that going into video games was a career. It just never, the games just appeared. Like they came out of nowhere. It's only common now that you have like these courses and degrees in game development, so one could, fathom the idea of going into that career. But yeah, at the time it jumped all over the place. Maybe settled on graphic design. That could be maybe the best answer I could give once I started college. Yeah.
And how did you find your way to architecture and why architecture? I mean, I'm hearing you retell the story. And for me, as a careers practitioner, I can see the pattern. There was definitely, in whatever you said, whether it be graphic design or even being a football player and playing games, it was definitely a job where creativity and, the out of the box type of mindset would definitely be clear indications that you were not looking for that rigid type occupation. But where in the path did architecture come up for you? Was it a role model? Was it something that you started to connect with because of what was around you? Or did you kind of just fall into that occupation?
It's a bit of a cop-out, but it might be a little bit of everything you just mentioned. So here's the thing. It's like, again, in the immediate environment that I had, with the parents you have, and the type of cultural constraints, let's say, and expectations maybe is a better word, that we have, at least in our part of the world. The expectation would always be, hey, you're either gonna end up being a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, and an engineer being a very, nebulous career where architecture might fit in. But you're right, though. Like there was always this need to be a bit creative somehow, and that's why I was thinking about graphic design. My parents were telling me, "Hey, you're going to be a doctor." I'm like, "Am I really?" And I'm going to go into a few little details, which, in the end, they don't matter, but maybe this is going to resonate with some of the students. And like, I had fantastic, like, biology SAT scores and chemistry as well. And that kind of fueled the argument for my parents. Like, you're going to be a doctor? Like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor. I want something a little more creatively fulfilling. Graphic design, which is all that was available to us. Although I started learning about other careers as time went by, such as industrial design, designing lamps and phones, like it's shoes and stuff like that. And I think you're beginning to see the pattern over here. The compromise was, and this is kind of me, I guess, following into this, is going into architecture. My father was an engineer. And it kind of, I would say I kind of fell into that. There's a bit of like a creative side to it, while kind of continuing from what my father has experienced. And I don't want to say I just fell into it and did not enjoy it completely, or or anything like that. I learned to really enjoy it, really love it. Architecture is a form of design. And I love everything design related,
Would you say that experience, I mean, you did that for quite an amount of time. I mean, you graduated in 2002 and then went up to reskill in 2011 when you found your way into creative. So do you now think, looking back, that actually it made sense to be an architect, in the sense of understanding how to use technology, being able to design and see a vision and then create it? Is that a skill that you find really useful? Do you find yourself tapping back into the architectural skills that you would have learned as a game developer?
Absolutely. You're completely right on both of those points. Getting familiar with the technology, getting familiar with the design process, right? So the design process is very similar across different industries. I mean, that's why they tag along that word to all those different industries, whether it's graphic design or industrial design. I know it's not tagged on architecture, but it is, right? Architecture is design, and game design as well. There's a process there about problem solving and working with other disciplines, working in a team, working to solve what the client wants, again, depending on the industry, or what your audience wants, like in game development. So I would totally agree with you. There are so many skills that I carried on from that into game development, without a doubt.
And it's so important for young people to really begin to understand that it's not choosing one thing. It's actually saying, I see career development as a sandwich. It's constantly adding another layer to what we have. So would you say now, in retrospect, that conversation you would have had with your parents who were, Nassib, we want you to go down more of a traditional path. And I think we have to empathize with parents, because what they want is the best for their children, and what they're bringing with them is the construction of how they learned to prepare for future careers, and always thinking, I want my child to do even better. So, here's the knowledge that I have. And what do you mean you want to play games and that's going to be your job? Like, no, we want you to really be doing this. So now, in retrospect, do you see that your parents are they now on board this new career that you've really evolved into, or are they still feeling, oh, what did he do? He left architecture to play games.
Well, I'm a bit of an outlier, right? Because the age I'd done it at, I was well into adulthood, right? So one, they didn't have much of a say in it. However, of course, they had an opinion on it. They were graceful enough not to be too overt about it, but I knew, right? However, now I can see, like, they've not just accepted it, and they've I've heard it from them and through other family that, hey, you know what, this actually fits you. This is what you should have been doing the whole time. But to circle back to something else you said, absolutely, empathizing with your parents, maybe wanting to have some other career for you in mind, that's something you always have to keep in mind. Like, they always have your best interest. They've seen you grow up by the time you're choosing a career or considering to choose a career, it's around 18 years on average, depending on the different systems you're in. They've been watching you for all that time. They know a lot about you, and sometimes they may know a lot about you more than you know about yourself. So cut them some slack whenever they want you to go down a different path.
So true. So I know everybody watching this right now is like, come on, Miss V, I can almost hear them. Get into the games discussion. So I'm going to take you through the time that you were working at Ubisoft. I mean, you dedicated 8.5 years to that career at Ubisoft as a game designer before you launched yourself into your own entrepreneurship and setting up your own game development organization. So what did you learn as a game designer working for a large organization such as Ubisoft?
So there is truly a distinction between working for like a large publisher developer like Ubisoft and going indie or independent, as they like to call it in the industry. There are a lot more stakeholders, right? So there's a lot of giving, taking, compromising. Soft skills are so important. Nobody wants to work with someone that's not pleasant to work with, right? And in the end, every day in, day out, you have to work with people, and a lot of people, whether it's in people of the same discipline, which you'll usually have more things in common with, or people of other disciplines, like, for example, me being a game designer and have to work with programmers, with the artists, with the producers, sometimes with contractors outside of the company, or with people from headquarters. So there's a lot of people involved. Everyone wants something different, and there's a lot of life skills that you need to learn on the job, and maybe even beforehand, no matter what your previous job is, in learning how to deal with people.
And what kind of, I'm just thinking, games are evolving every day. Every day there's something new, there's a new idea, and they're being done by younger and younger people. So this archaic idea that I need to wait till I get a certain degree, does that even exist in your world as a game developer? Or should young people stop looking at that type of a career as the traditional, it comes after a certain degree? I mean, how do they prepare for this type of a world when you're reading, on social media that 7-year-olds are becoming famous for their games?
That's true. The wonderful thing about the games industry is that you have many avenues of going about it now, right? There was a time where the only way you could get into it is you sitting in your room, your basement, or the attic. The stereotypical game developer model, and that's the only way you'd ever get into games, and finding people of a similar background. But now, as time's gone by, yes, there are universities and colleges that provide degrees, even masters in game development as well. Having said that, you don't have to get a degree, right? Just like in many careers that are, well, most of the ones that aren't too technical, you can do a lot of research. There's a lot of stuff you can find online to learn. And that's how I started. That's what I did late nights after work, as an architect. I'd come home, get online, do some research, try to understand, okay, that's how they made this, that's how they made that. I'd get on the computer, try to do it myself. And I was doing it at an age where some would say you're at a disadvantage. Like your mind tends to be more of a sponge when you're younger, so you can imagine the advantage that others would have by getting started with this much earlier in their life. There are so many tools out there that make this easy for people to do. I found a community that just made maps for a pre-existing game right? Team Fortress 2, if anyone may have played that or is familiar with it, and they have a famous community. You get online, they show you the tools, you ask questions, you make your level, you present it to the community, they all test it. There's so much you can learn over there. And that's what I did in the evenings. It was enough for me to put together a mini portfolio and submit to Ubisoft and their gaming academy to be accepted to the gaming academy and learn for 18 months how to develop games, not just as a hobby. So I got a mix, I guess, of all those different options that a person could do. Researching, learning on your own at home, and actually learning under an institution as well.
What type of systems should for young people be learning or keep an eye out for if they want to become a game developer?
If by systems, if you mean software, there's a lot of great ones out there that are free. Again, what I had at the time was something called Hammer by a company called Valve, famous for making Left 4 Dead, Team Fortress, Half-Life. That was the software that everyone would get their hands on. That and something called Unreal, which still exists now. So I'd get your hands on Unreal, which is part of Epic. People may have heard the name Epic. They're famous for developing and publishing Fortnite, right? So everyone's crazy about Fortnite these days. So Epic also have this thing called a game engine. It's called Unreal, and you can download that for free. Tons of tutorials within Unreal and third-party tutorials, everything on YouTube or Udemy or anything else. And Unity as well. Unity is another famous third-party game-making engine that anyone can download for free and start learning how to make games on.
Incredible. And I know that our students are probably like, yeah, definitely, I get that. For me, this is a whole new language. So I apologize for some of the questions I might ask, but I'm just thinking about, not just the student at the eldest part of the school, but we're also looking at students that are younger part of the schools and coming into this. So this idea of developing a game and creating a game, I mean, how does one sit down and get started? Is there a checklist that you have, or is it kind of like, I almost imagine the creative genius drawing and kind of visualizing what it looks like. But I mean, is there a systematic approach that you take when you want to go from A to finish line?
There is a systematic approach, but everyone, when they first started making their own games outside of a big company such as Ubisoft, you try so many things and you fail, and that's part of it. And you have so much to learn, right? Like everyone has this great idea. They want to manifest it in a game, and so they start working on it, and they might not go about it the right way. The most important thing really is understanding your audience. It's the same for anything that you create, whether it's a show, right? You need to understand what people want to hear and see, and so you develop content for that show, right? It's the same with games. You need to understand your players. You need to understand what they like, what their expectations of the game genre you are making are. So if I'm going to make a game that is similar to Fortnite, for example, but then it ends up playing like chess, you have a problem. So the very first thing is understanding your audience or your players, and then you start setting milestones for yourself for what your idea needs to hit every few months. Once you understand your milestones, you break that down into smaller and smaller tasks, and you organize your tasks and based on the dependencies. We could spend another whole hour on how to manage a project, how to organize it, using tools like Trello. Trello is fantastic to help someone first start to learn how to manage tasks and schedules and so forth. So yeah.
Amazing. I am a fan of Trello as well. Okay, so let's go through these steps again. So you have an idea, you design it, you go through your systematic approach, the game is finished. What happens next?
So one thing I need to add between everything I just said and to help answer your question is that you need to be testing that game often and rigorously. And by testing it, that means putting it into the hands of your players, right? So you're doing that while you're creating the game itself. It's part of the process before you quote unquote finish it. These days, something they like to say a lot in the industry that no game is truly finished. But yes, test it rigorously with some players, get some feedback, modify the game, do that process over and over and over again. And once it's considered done, test it some more. Now it's done. Now you release it. It's out in the market, and that's when you get your real feedback, right? While you're testing, it's down to a few set number of players. Once it's out in the market, hopefully it's in the hands of thousands and thousands of players, and get even more feedback. And you have to come back, change, fix, adjust that game, because the longer it lasts, the more people play it, the more money you make. And as fun as a career as game development is, in the end, it is a career. It's a job, and you do have to put food on the table for yourself and hopefully eventually a family if that's something you want. And so making money is important, guys. Like it's a thing.
Of course, of course. So I know that if you're working for an organization, I mean, you're a salaried employee and at the end of the week or month, you'll get your salary. But when you're working for yourself as a game developer, how do you do it? Do you do it on your own, and do you launch it? And how do you earn an income when you're a game developer as an entrepreneur?
So there are many avenues for financing the project, which means financing yourself and anyone else you have brought on board to help you make this game. At the beginning, like any entrepreneur, they're probably getting their money from either money they've saved up themselves, or what they call the 3 Fs, right? Friends, family, fools, right? Just to help you get started at the beginning. And the general model, although it changes and it's modified by different people, is that okay? You're putting together this game. You get to a point where there is a basic prototype, all right? Something that you can show off to other people. Once it's at that point, then you can show it off to other developers and convince them to join you, make that prototype even better. And once that prototype is good enough, then you can start shopping it out to like angel investors or crowdfunding, right? And that's where you can start earning some money to keep the project and the studio afloat. It is hard being an entrepreneur, and it's hard being an independent game developer as well. You put those together, it's tough. So you're constantly working on this game, and every now and then, going to conventions, showing it off, getting it into people's eyes, seeing if it's going to get the interest of other investors. Oh, I forgot to mention publishers, of course, right? Which would then come and say, hey, we like where this is going. We're ready to fund this project from now till, let's say, the end. But we have some conditions. And that's when the soft skills come back. And you've got to start negotiating with what those conditions could be in order for everyone to be happy. You want your money in the end, but they also want a product that they would be happy to publish to the masses as well.
Brilliant. Quite the process. I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
like the regular journey of an entrepreneur, and the only difference is that you're providing a product and a service of game development and the product of that game. What have you seen as the most challenging elements of your career as a game developer?
I'm going to circle back on something I mentioned earlier, and that is even if you're predisposed to being able to work with people, it's still challenging, right? Because not everyone is like that. So again, the most challenging thing is learning how to deal with others, understand their points of view, understand why they're being rigid about something or why they need something. I mean, they have their side of the project to make sure is going smoothly. If they're on the production side, they need to make sure budget and time is met. If they're on the art side, I'm speaking as a designer, right? So these are the other disciplines around. If they're from the art side, they want to make sure that game looks as beautiful as possible. But then the programmers want to make sure that, hey, this game is working smooth enough. It's not going to be too buggy. Nassib, maybe that that incredible design idea you want to do, it's not going to work out because it's going to crash the game, right? So you got to learn to let go of that idea and understand why they're asking for that. Sometimes you can get heated, but that's part of it, whether it's this career or anything else.
Going back on our earlier conversation about your education and looking at the path that you took, I know that you went down the path of starting a career as an architect. You then found your way back into upskilling in SAE, where you did digital painting, and then you went on to Ubisoft Gaming Academy at 2454. And here you are now embarking on being an entrepreneur. I think traditionally young people associate the idea of gaming with having to have a computer engineering degree. Would you say that it's common practice in your industry? Do you work with people that have gone down that computer engineering pathway? Is it necessary, or is it just, it's just another way to get into it, but at the end of the day you still have to learn the process of creating a game just like everybody else?
So there definitely have been people I've worked with that have computer engineering degrees, without a doubt, but not everyone, especially if you're not a programmer. And the other fascinating thing about the game development industry is that it's kind of like the I don't know if this is a poor analogy or not, like the Staten Island of careers, right? Like, everyone goes there from other industries. Like you'll find people that were artists before, that were architects, engineers, doctors, physicists. Like you can't imagine the types of backgrounds that people have in the games industry. I think it's one of the most diverse industries in the world. So yes, you can come from any background. There are things to learn. You can go about that by getting a degree. You can go about that by finding other avenues into the industry, like as an architect, something in common with game development would be level design. So as if you're designing the worlds in the level. So when you find some of those commonalities between your career and what's needed in game development, that could be another path inward as well. And then there's just, hey, interning and learning on the job. So there's many ways to go about it. And you don't need to have, although it could help, a computer engineering degree.
So let's go into the fun part, or what I would consider to be the fun part is, how do you come up with the characters? Is it something, I always wonder when I'm looking at some of these games and I think, I wonder whoever created this, was this, is this an example of a life experience? Is it fictional? Is it something they would have heard about? Or how do you come up with, when you're sitting down and developing a game or coming up with an idea, how do you come up with the characters? Because it's a form of storytelling, isn't it? And it's a form of allowing other people to enter the world that you see through your mind and kind of play that game. But where does it all begin? Where does that inspiration come from?
Definitely from past experiences, I would say. Now, if you ask 20 different people where the inspiration comes from, you may get 20 different answers. But I would bet that if they looked a little deeper, they'd realize it's always from past experiences. There's a saying, right, that there's nothing new created under the sun, all right? And that's fine. You're not going to invent something that's totally new. You're going to invent things that are based on stuff that existed before. Like another fantastic saying is that we stand on the shoulder of giants, right? Star Wars, as amazing as it is and as widely, it's touched so many lives. That's based on, he didn't come up with that stuff completely, out of thin air. It was based on old Japanese films. It was based on Dune, which just came out this summer, but at the time was nothing more than a book. No one was able to develop it into a movie. It was based on so many things, which he took inspiration from, added his 20 or 30% changes, found a way for them to come together in a way that made sense. And there you have it. You have this wonderful world of Star Wars and all the incredible characters in it. And along the way, he had a lot of help, right? George Lucas did not make those movies on his own. They had incredible artists that gave visuals to the characters that he created on paper. So it's a very collaborative process as well.
What are you playing currently, Nassib? If I were to come and look at the games, what would we see on your computer?
Oh, I got a pretty diverse taste on games. So right now I'm going through a game called Hitman 3. Fantastic game, very systemic. It's you play as an assassin, but you get this nice sandbox of a level where you can assassinate people in many different ways. Let's see. There's another great game by Ubisoft. It's called Anno. It's a series of games actually, set in different time periods where you build cities. But yeah, I would say between those two games, that's mostly what I'm playing. Oh, I play a lot of Fortnite with my kids as well, and I enjoy it.
And on that, I'm going to bring this conversation to a recording wrap, but we're going to open up for a live Q&A. I know we have new students that have just joined us. Nassib, what an incredible conversation. To everybody out there in the virtual world watching this, this was one of the most fun conversations I had, and my first with a game developer. So thank you, Nassib. You've set the bar really high. And I think what I'm taking away at the highest level of respect is that there isn't one path towards what you're currently doing. And from what you told me, Nassib, I think every previous experience adds a very interesting level to the work that you do and something that will bring a different flavor to the games that you develop. So whatever you're thinking of going into, remember what Nassib said, there are so many different pathways that lead you to game development and game design. Thank you for watching, and we will see you at our next Desk Careers Digital Spotlight.